Hi, I'm Clare Beams, and I'm the author of The Garden. The Garden is a novel about pregnancy as a haunted house. So it is a novel that's combining the literary and the historic and the gothic and the fantastical. And it's set in 1948 in the Berkshires at an isolated country house turned hospital where a husband and wife doctor team are offering what they're claiming is a pioneering cure for repeated miscarriage. And our main character is Irene Willard, who is a pregnant patient who has come to this hospital pregnant and desperate to stay that way. And who's trying to follow the doctor's rules even though she is not a rule follower, but finds a long-forgotten walled garden full of mysteries on the grounds and begins, as the doctor's plans start to fall apart, to wonder if she should be trying to use the power she seems to be discovering for herself. The Garden really had two seeds. The first of them was a reference I came across in a tangent of research that I was doing for my previous novel, The Illness Lesson, which also is operating in the territory of the medical establishment's historical treatment of women. And that reference was to a drug called diethylstilbestrol, which was in fact used in this country from the 1930s to the 1970s to treat women for repeated miscarriage. And it was in fact pioneered by a husband and wife team of researchers named Olive Watkins Smith and George Van Sicklen Smith. And that drug, what they had noticed was that around the time of miscarriage, women's hormones tended to swing pretty dramatically. And so their thinking was that if they could just even out those levels, everything would be better. And that was what caught me, because I think that historically, like once we start talking about evening women out, there's often something kind of not so great going on. And that in fact was the case here. That the drug turned out to cause these terrible health problems and birth defects that were often not observable until many years later in the female offspring of the women who were treated with the drug. So the drug is sometimes referred to now as the silent thalidomide for that reason. But what grabbed me was this idea of controlling women's bodies, which is something that thematically is of a lot of interest to me. And the second seed was just my lifelong fascination with the novel The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which is a novel that as a kid I loved. Just the idea of these hidden spaces and these worlds that you could discover that were just for you. But when you read that novel as an adult, there is this kind of unsettling messaging going on that's about kind of willing oneself into health. And kind of thinking healthy so that one will be healthy. And I found that idea also to be just really kind of fascinating. And so those two seeds planted themselves, and that was the beginning of the novel. I'm often interested in the ways that the world historically has responded to women's bodies and minds and the links between them, and the space that has been made and not made for those kinds of questions. So I'm often exploring that. My previous novel, The Illness Lesson, was set at a 19th century girls' school that has the noble but kind of willfully oblivious mission of giving girls a true education, but the people in charge of the school really don't know what to do when this episode of mass psychogenic illness, what used to be called mass hysteria, occurs. And in The Garden, I'm exploring the really quite haunted experience of pregnancy and sort of the approach that the world has taken to that experience for women. I'm also really fascinated by time as sort of a layered thing to operate in. I grew up in a house that was built in the 1730s and that had a dirt floor basement with these ancient tree trunks holding up the house. And the town that I grew up in, Newtown, Connecticut, was founded in the 1600s. So you always had this feeling that you were kind of in multiple times simultaneously. And I think my writing is often trying to get back to that space where kind of the historical and the impossible meet.